Roof could face the death penalty after being convicted of federal hate crimes and the murders of 9 black parishioners at the Emmanuel AME Church.
Salvador Ramos never imagined that stepping into prison would mark the beginning of his true nightmare, where relentless physical and psychological torment would push him to the edge. Dylan Roof, another notorious school shooter, also didn't foresee the hell that awaited him. Brutal attacks from fellow inmates, forced isolation, and the constant fear of being killed at any moment. In prison, school shooters are not only punished by the system, but also face an even harsher justice from their fellow prisoners. If you thought their story ended with their arrest, get ready to uncover the darkest side of life behind bars for these criminals. Salvador Ramos.
Salvador Ramos was a boy who was not bullied. He would try to pick on people but fail, and it would aggravate him.
Salvador Ramos is a name forever linked to the tragic shooting at Uvalde's Robb Elementary School, where he opened fire on May 24, 2022. At just 18 years old, he took the lives of 19 children and 2 teachers, leaving a community shattered and the nation grappling with the repercussions. The shockwaves of his actions sparked intense debates around gun control, mental health, and the safety of educational environments.
In that classroom, and I failed to take her home after the award ceremonies, and now she's dead.
As Ramos faced his trial, he likely had no idea of the nightmare awaiting him behind bars. Life in prison has proven to be perilous, as he has become a target for violence from other inmates, many of whom regard him as both a coward and a monster. The harsh realities of prison life, far removed from the freedoms he once enjoyed, have likely resulted in significant mental and emotional struggles for him. Reports indicate that Ramos has spent considerable time in solitary confinement, intended to protect him from potential violence. However, this isolation has taken a severe toll on his mental health, leading to heightened anxiety and depression. The lack of social interaction, combined with the weight of his actions, has transformed what was meant to be a protective measure into a source of deep torment, exacerbating his already fragile mental state. As he copes with the severe realities of prison life, the experiences of other school shooters provide a grim backdrop. Like them, Ramos is forced to confront the consequences of his actions and the intense animosity directed at him by others. Many who have committed similar acts experience extreme physical and emotional pain, with some tragically opting for suicide as a way to escape the suffering of prison life. As Salvador Ramos grapples with violence from his fellow inmates for his crimes in Uvalde, we now turn to a killer whose extremist ideology has shut the door on acceptance, even among his own kind. Dylan Roof. In June 2015, Dylan Roof carried out the shooting at the Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina, resulting in 9 fatalities and several injuries. Identifying as a white supremacist, Roof specifically targeted African-American churchgoers during a religious service.
Expected to call several witnesses this afternoon, and closing arguments are expected to begin tomorrow.
His act of hate inflicted deep wounds on the affected families and provoked widespread condemnation across the nation. In January 2017, Roof received a death sentence, and his case emerged as a symbol of the ongoing fight against racism and gun violence in America. Upon entering the prison system, Roof has been placed in total isolation, known as administrative segregation. This decision reflects the severity of his crime and the ongoing threats he faces from fellow inmates. His notoriety makes him a potential target, as many prisoners find his ideology of racial hatred unacceptable. Consequently, security measures are exceptionally strict. Roof lives under stringent conditions to prevent assaults, further isolating him from the general inmate population. Despite his confinement, Roof has attempted to communicate with other white supremacist groups. Prison authorities have been vigilant in monitoring these activities, thwarting any attempts at coordination or recruitment within the facility. This heightened scrutiny illustrates the complexities involved in managing prisoners with extremist ideologies, as the system aims not only to punish offenders, but also to prevent their beliefs from inciting further violence.
That is what these 12 jurors have unanimously decided today. Dylan Roof will get the death penalty.
Roof now exists in an environment where his extremist views are openly rejected and condemned by fellow inmates. Roof's prison life is characterized by profound physical and social isolation. While administrative segregation protects him from other prisoners, it simultaneously deprives him of basic human interaction. This seclusion has adversely affected his mental well-being, forcing him to grapple with overwhelming loneliness and despair. The absence of emotional or psychological support, combined with the constant pressure of living in a hostile environment, results in an existence defined by suffering and alienation. In conclusion, Dylann Roof's story not only underscores the atrocities of his actions, but also the severe repercussions he faces in prison. His experience highlights the brutal nature of the penal system and how the notoriety of certain crimes can intensify the suffering of inmates who must navigate a hostile and resentful environment. Roof serves as a poignant example of how school shooters impact their victims and endure significant punishment within the confines of prison. While Roof deals with his isolation due to his hateful ideology, we will now explore the story of a killer who, although his crime stems from a place of mental desperation, also faces an unforgiving environment that offers no mercy. Eric Houston. Eric Houston was responsible for the shooting at Lyndhurst High School in California in 1992, where he killed 4 people and injured 10 others. This attack shocked the community and ignited a nationwide discussion on gun violence in schools. In 1995, Houston was sentenced to death and has since been on death row at San Quentin Prison. His trial revealed significant mental health issues, yet this did not prevent his conviction. His case has garnered considerable media attention, complicating his situation within the prison system. In a documented fact, the Lyndhurst High School shooting became one of the pivotal events that sparked debates about gun control laws in the United States. At San Quentin, Houston has faced several violent encounters with fellow inmates. Many view him as a target due to the nature of his crime, resulting in a hostile and dangerous environment. Inmate violence against individuals who have harmed children or committed acts of violence against minors is common. In one reported incident, a group of inmates attacked Houston in a revenge attempt for his actions during the shooting. This pattern of violence prompted prison authorities to implement additional security measures to protect him, reflecting a reality where notoriety can place inmates at constant risk. Despite being on death row, Houston lives in a state of perpetual vigilance. The prison atmosphere is tense, with other inmates, many of whom are parents, showing no mercy toward those who have committed crimes against children. This lack of empathy forces Houston to remain on high alert, fearing for his safety. His experience underscores the harshness of the prison system and how the notoriety surrounding certain crimes can profoundly impact inmates' lives. It is a documented fact that many inmates who commit crimes against children face extreme backlash and hostility from their peers. The constant threat of aggression has significantly affected Houston's mental health. Confronting the repercussions of his actions in such a hostile environment has led to cycles of anxiety and paranoia. Daily concerns for his safety have trapped Houston in a state of chronic stress, which can have lasting effects on his psychological well-being. The conditions on death row are severe, and the lack of human interaction and emotional support exacerbates his situation. Inmates on death row often experience isolation, which can lead to deteriorating mental health. As Houston becomes a target of violence from other prisoners because of his heinous crime, this is the history of a killer whose mental instability has left him vulnerable in a system that fails to understand his suffering. Michael Carneal. Michael Carneal was the shooter in the Heath High School shooting in Kentucky, where he killed 3 students and injured 5 others.
Michael Carneal was just 14 when he opened fire at Heath High School in West Paducah.
Since being sentenced to life imprisonment, Carneal has faced numerous challenges within the prison system, including severe mental health issues. Upon entering the correctional facility, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and other mental disorders. This diagnosis has led to his repeated isolation, as prison authorities deemed it necessary to protect both his safety and that of other inmates due to his history of erratic behavior and the potential threat he may pose. Despite receiving treatment in psychiatric units, Carneal has been the target of both physical and verbal assaults by fellow inmates. The perception of his mental instability has not diminished the anger directed at him for his past actions. For many inmates, His mental health struggles do not excuse the brutality of his crimes, intensifying his predicament within the correctional environment. Carneal often finds himself on high alert, facing hostility from those unwilling to forgive his violent past, living in fear of becoming a victim of attacks. It is a documented fact that many inmates face bullying and abuse as a direct consequence of their crimes. Carneal's life in prison has been characterized by extended periods in solitary confinement, initially intended to shield him from potential assaults. However, prolonged isolation has also resulted in negative psychological effects, such as increased anxiety and depression. This combination of a life sentence, mental health struggles, and a hostile environment creates an oppressive atmosphere that hampers his rehabilitation. His situation highlights the difficulties of managing individuals with mental health issues in correctional facilities, particularly those involved in such grave offenses. A documented fact indicates that inmates with mental health disorders are often at a higher risk of experiencing violence in prison. As time has passed, Carneal continues to battle not only his mental health challenges, but also the stigma he faces while incarcerated. His case emphasizes the lack of compassion that often surrounds criminals, even when there are indications of psychological distress. His daily existence is a continuous struggle between the desire for assistance and the harsh realities of a system that offers little understanding of his circumstances. The ongoing assaults and fear of violence are integral parts of his life behind bars. It is a documented fact that inmates dealing with mental health issues require tailored support and treatment to help them manage their conditions effectively. His case not only sheds light on the challenges of mental health in incarceration, but also raises difficult questions about rehabilitation and the ability of the system to treat those who, despite their accountability for terrible actions, are also victims of their mental struggles. In the midst of the hostility Carneal faces due to his mental health issues, we now see a killer who, even without a conviction, already experiences the wrath of his peers for an act that has forever altered his life and the lives of many others. Demetrios Portus. Demetrios Portus is the individual charged in the Santa Fe High School shooting in Texas, which resulted in the deaths of 10 people and injuries to 13 others.
The relentless American tragedy unfolding once again. Another school shooting, this time in Santa Fe, Texas. 10 people killed, including 9 students.
Since his arrest, he has been held without bail as he awaits trial. His prison life has been characterized by a hostile environment, facing constant threats from fellow inmates. To safeguard him from potential attacks, prison authorities have decided to keep him in solitary confinement, largely due to the negative perception that other inmates have of those who commit crimes against young people. The opinions of his cellmates are overwhelmingly unfavorable. For many inmates, school shooters represent the worst aspects of society, and they show no compassion towards those who commit such violent acts. Since arriving in prison, Portus has received numerous threats, which have only added to his isolation. Although he has not yet been convicted, his reputation as a shooter has made his daily life one filled with fear and insecurity, worsening his mental state. As his case progresses toward trial, Portus's living conditions in prison are becoming increasingly complicated. While solitary confinement provides some protection from violence, it also leads to negative psychological effects, such as anxiety and depression. This hostile environment not only impacts his emotional well-being, but also raises serious questions about how accused individuals are treated in the correctional system. The violence surrounding his case makes the possibility of effective rehabilitation seem distant. After meeting Demetrios Portus, we now explore the story of a killer who, upon facing his sentence, discovers that in prison, his notoriety only exacerbates his suffering. T.J. Lane. T.J. Lane was the perpetrator of the Chardon High School shooting in Ohio.
Breaking news, T.J. Lane, the Chardon High School shooter, on the loose right now. He escaped this evening from a prison in western Ohio. Good evening. Welcome to News Channel 5 at 11. I'm Chris Flanagan.
A tragic event that left 3 students dead and 3 others injured. After this horrific act, he received 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. His trial captured significant media attention, particularly due to his unsettling courtroom demeanor, which displayed a shocking lack of remorse for his actions.
Saying pull the trigger to kill your son, masturbates to memory. Love you.
During the proceedings, Lane's provocative gestures towards the victims' families were widely reported and contributed to a public outcry against him. These actions not only heightened the emotional pain for the victims' loved ones, but also significantly impacted how he was perceived by his fellow inmates. Upon entering the prison system, Lane quickly found himself in a precarious position, as the animosity towards school shooters runs deep among the inmate population. From the moment Lane was incarcerated, he became the target of relentless aggression. Other inmates, driven by their disdain for his crime, viewed him as an embodiment of everything they detest about violence against the vulnerable. This led to numerous assaults that prompted prison officials to place him in solitary confinement for his safety. However, this protective measure was far from a remedy. Instead, it exacerbated his already tenuous mental state, trapping him in a cycle of anxiety and fear. The isolation he faced in solitary confinement came with its own set of challenges. While it offered physical protection from the violence outside, it also intensified his feelings of loneliness and despair. Lane's days blurred together in a sterile cell, devoid of human interaction, and he was left to confront the haunting memories of his actions without any form of therapy or support. The lack of empathy he faced from both inmates and the broader society contributed to a sense of dehumanization, making his emotional suffering all the more profound. Lane's situation reveals the profound psychological toll that his incarceration has taken on him. He is not just facing the consequences of his actions, but is also enduring the relentless hostility from fellow inmates who view him as a pariah. This enmity has led to a series of violent encounters, impacting his mental well-being. Isolated in solitary confinement, Lane struggles with feelings of despair and hopelessness, forced to confront the reality of his crime without any meaningful support or understanding. This unending cycle of violence and isolation amplifies his suffering as he grapples with the enormity of his actions and the lack of empathy from those around him. From the violence they encounter to the ongoing isolation, school shooters endure a tormenting existence in prison. They become outcasts, targeted for assaults and resentment, raising questions about the dehumanization they experience. If these accounts have impacted you and you want to learn more about the dark aspects of these stories, make sure to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell so you don't miss our upcoming videos. Thank you for being with us.